Matthew 26. The plot to kill Jesus. When Jesus has finished teaching, he told his disciples, "You know, 2 days from now will be Passover. This is when the Son of Man will be handed over to his enemies and nailed to the cross." At that time, the chief priest and the nation's leader were meeting at the home of Caiaphas and high priest. They planned how they could sneak around and have Jesus arrested and put to death. But they said, "We must not do it during Passover because the people will riot." At Bethany, Jesus was in the town of Bethany, eating the home of Simon, who had leprosy. A woman came in with a bottle of expensive perfume and poured it on Jesus' head. But when his disciples saw this, they became angry and complained, "Why such a waste? We could have sold this perfume for a lot of money and give it to the poor." Jesus knew what they were thinking, and he said, "Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing for me. You will always have the poor with you, but you won't always have me. She has poured perfume on my body to prepare it for burial." You may be sure that whatever the good news is told all over the world, people will remember what she has done, and they will tell others. Judas and the chief priest. Judas Iscariot was one of the 12 disciples. He went to the chief priest and asked, "How much will you give me if I help you arrest Jesus?" They said, "Judas, 30 silver coins." And from then on, he started looking for a good chance to betray Jesus. Jesus ate the Passover meal with his disciples. On the first day of the festival of thin bread, Jesus' disciples came to him and asked, "Where do you want us to prepare the Passover meal?" Jesus told them to go to a certain man in the city and tell him, "Our teacher says, my time has come. I want to eat the Passover meal with my disciples in your home." They did as Jesus told them and prepared the meal. When Jesus was eating with his 12 disciples that evening, he said, "One of you will surely hand me over to my enemies." The disciples were very sad, and each one said to Jesus, "Lord, you can't mean me." He answered, "One of you men who has eaten with me from this dish will betray me. The Son of Man will die, as the scriptures say, but it's going to be terrible for the one who betrays me. The man would be better off if he had never been born." Judas said, "Teacher, you surely don't mean me. That's what you say." Jesus replied, "But later, Judas did betray him." The Lord's Supper. During the meal, Jesus took some bread in his hands. He blessed the bread and broke it. Then he gave it to his disciples and said, "Take this and eat it. "This is my body." Jesus picked up a cup of wine and gave thanks to God. He then gave it to his disciples and said, "Take this and drink it. This is my blood, and with it God make his agreement with you. It will be poured out so that many people will have their sins forever forgiven. From now on, I am not going to drink any wine until I drink new wine with you in my Father's kingdom." Then they sang a hymn and went out of the Mount of Olives. Peter's promise. Jesus said to his disciples during this very night, "All of you will reject me. As the scriptures say, I will strike down the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. But after I am raised to life, I'll go ahead of you to Galilee." Peter spoke up. "Even if all of the others reject you, I never will." Jesus replied, "I promise you, before a rooster crows tonight, you will say 3 times that you don't know me." But Peter said, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never say I don't know you." All the others said the same things. Jesus' place. Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Capernaum. When they got there, he told them, "Steer while I go over there and pray." Jesus took along Peter and the 2 brothers, James and John. He was very sad and troubled, and he said to them, "I am so sad that I feel as if I am dying. Stay here and keep awake with me." Jesus walked on a little way, then he knelt with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, don't make me suffer by drinking from this cup, but do what you want, and not I want." He came back and found his disciples sleeping. So he said to Peter, "Can't any of you stay awake with me for just 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you won't be tested. You want to do what is right? You're weak. But you're weak." Again, Jesus went to pray and said, "My Father, if there is no other way, and I must suffer, I will still do what you want." Jesus came back and found them sleeping again. They simply could not keep their eyes open. He left them and prayed the same prayer once more. Finally, Jesus returned to his disciples and said, "Are you still sleeping and resting? The time has come for the Son of Man to be handed over to sinners. Get up, let's go. The one who will betray me is already here." Jesus is arrested. Jesus was still speaking when Judas, the betrayer, came up. He was one of the 12 disciples, and a large mob armed with sword and clubs was with him. They had been sent by the chief priests and the nation's leaders. Judas had told them ahead of time. Arrest the man, agreed with a kiss. Judas walked right up to Jesus and said, "Hello, teacher." Then Judas kissed him. Jesus replied, "My friend, that's right you came for." The man grabbed Jesus and arrested him. One of the Jesus followers pulled out a sword. He struck the servant of a high priest and cut off his ear. But Jesus told him, "Put your sword away. Anyone who lives by fighting will die by fighting. Don't you know that I could ask my Father, and he would at once send me more than 12 armies of angels?" But then, how could the word of the scripture come true, which say this must happen? Jesus said to the mob, "Why do you come with sword and clubs to arrest me like a criminal? Day after day I sat and thought in the temple, and you didn't arrest me." All this happened so that what the prophet wrote would come true. All Jesus' disciples left him and ran away. Jesus is questioned by the council. After Jesus had been arrested, he was led off to the house of Caiaphas and the high priest. The nation's leaders and the teachers of the law must have were meeting there, but Peter followed along at a distance and came to the courtyard of the high priest's place. He went in and sat down with the guard to see what was going to happen. The chief priest and the whole council wanted to put Jesus to death. They tried to find some people who would tell lies about him in court, but they could not find any, even though many did come and tell lies. At last, the man came forward and said, "This man claimed he could tear down God's temple and build it again in 3 days." The high priest stood up and asked Jesus, "Why don't you say something in your own defense? Don't you hear the charges they are making against you?" But Jesus didn't answer. So the high priest said, "With the living God looking on, you must tell the truth. Are you the Messiah, the Son of God?" "That's what you say," Jesus answered. "But I tell all of you, soon you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right side of God all powerful and coming on the clouds of heaven." The high priest then tore his robe and said, "This man claims to be God. We don't need any more witnesses. You have heard what he said. What do you think?" They answered, "He is guilty and deserves to die." Then they spit in his face and hit him with their fists. Others left him and said, "You think you are the Messiah? So tell us who hit you." Peter says he doesn't know Jesus. While Peter was sitting out in the courtyard, a servant girl came up to him and said, "You're with Jesus from Galilee." But in front of everyone, Peter said. That isn't so. I don't know what you are talking about. When Peter had gone out of the gate, another servant girl saw him and said to some people there, "This man was with Jesus from Nazareth." Again, Peter denied it, and this time he swore, "I don't even know the man." A little while later, some people standing there walked over to Peter and said, "We know you are one of them. We can tell it because you talk like someone from Galilee." Peter began to curse and swear, "I don't know that man." Right then a rooster crowed, and Peter remembered that Jesus had said, "Before a crowd, rooster crows, you say 3 times you don't know me." Then Peter went out and cried bitterly. Matthew chapter 27. Jesus is taken to Pilate. Early the next morning, all the chief priests and the nation's leaders met and decided Jesus should be put to death. They tied him up and led him away to Pilate, the governor. The death of Judas. Judas had betrayed Jesus, but when he learned that Jesus had been sentenced to death, he was sorry for what he had done. He returned the 30 silver coins to the chief priests and leaders and said, "I have sinned by betraying a man who had never done anything wrong." "So what? That's your problem," they replied. Judas threw the money into the temple and then went out and hanged himself. The chief priest picked up the money and said, "This money was paid to have a man killed. We can't put it in the temple treasury." Then they had a meeting and decided to buy a field that belonged to someone who made clay pots. They wanted to use it as a graveyard for foreigners. This is why people still call that place a field of blood. So the word of that prophet Jeremiah came true. They took the 30 silver coins, the price of a purse among the people of Israel. They paid it for the potter's field as the Lord has commanded me. Pilate questioned Jesus. Jesus brought before Pilate the governor, who asked him, "Are you the king of Jews?" "Those are your words," Jesus answered. And when the chief priests and leaders brought their charges against him, he didn't say a thing. Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear what crimes they say you have done?" But Jesus didn't say anything, and the governor was greatly amazed. The death sentence. During Passover, the governor always freed a prisoner chosen by the people. At the time, a well-known terrorist named Jesus Barabbas was in jail. So when the crowds came together, Pilate asked them, "Which prisoner do you want me to set free? Do you want Jesus, Barabbas, or Jesus, who is called the Messiah? Pilate knew the leader had brought Jesus to him because they were jealous. While Pilate was judging the case, his wife sent him a message. He said, "Don't have anything to do with the innocent man. I've had nightmare because of him." But the chief priests and the leaders convinced the crowds to ask for Barabbas to be set free and for Jesus to be killed. Pilate asked the crowd again, "Which of these two men do you want me to set free?" "Barabbas!" they shouted. Pilate asked them, "What am I to do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" They yelled, "Nail him to the cross." Pilate answered, "What crime has he done?" "Nail him to the cross," they yelled even louder. Pilate saw that there was nothing he could do, and that the people were starting to riot. So he caused some water and washed his hands in front of them and said, "I won't have anything to do with killing this man. You are the one doing it." Everyone answered, "We and our own families will take the blame for his death." Pilate set Barabbas free. Then he ordered his soldier to beat Jesus with the whip and nail him to the cross. Soldiers make fun of Jesus. The governor's soldier led Jesus into the fortress and brought together the rest of the troops. They stripped off Jesus' clothes and put a scarlet robe on him. They made a crown out of thorn branches and placed it on his head, and they put a stick in his right hand. The soldiers knelt down and pretended to worship him. He made fun of him and shouted, "Hey, you king of the Jews!" Then they spit on him. They took the stick from him and beat him on the head with it. Jesus is nailed to the cross. When the soldiers had finished making fun of Jesus, they took off the robe. They put his own clothes back on him and led him up to be nailed to the cross. On the way, they met a man named Simon, who was from Cyrene, Cyrene, and they forced him to carry Jesus' cross. They came to the place named Golgotha, which means place of the skull. There they gave Jesus some wine mixed with a drug to ease the pain. But when Jesus tasted what it was, he refused to drink it. The soldiers nailed Jesus to the cross and gambled to see what would get at his clothes. Then they sat down to guard him. Above his head, they put a sign that told why he was nailed there. It read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." The soldiers also nailed 2 criminals on crosses, one on the right of Jesus and the other to his left. People who passed by said terrible things about Jesus. They shook their head and shouted, "So you're the one who claimed you could tear down the temple and build it again in 3 days? If you're God's son, save yourself and come down from the cross." The chief priests, the leaders, and the teacher of the law of Moses also made fun of Jesus. They said, "He saved others, but he can't save himself. If he's the king of Israel, he should come down from the cross. Then we will believe him. He trusted God, so let God save him if he wants to." He even said he was God's son. The two criminals also said cruel things to Jesus. The death of Jesus. At noon, the sky turned dark and stayed that way until 3 o'clock. Then about that time, Jesus shouted, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you deserted me?" Some of the people standing there heard Jesus said and said, "He was calling for Eliah." One of them at once ran and grabbed a sponge. He soaked it in wine, then put it on a stick and held it up to Jesus. Others said, "Wait, let's see if Eliah will come and save him." Once again, Jesus shouted, and then he died. At once, the curtain in the temple was drawn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, and rocks split apart. Graves opened, and many of God's people were raised to life. They left their graves, and after Jesus had risen to life, they went into the holy city, where they were seen by many people. The officer and the soldiers guarding Jesus felt the earthquake and saw everything else that happened. They were frightened and said, "This man really was God's son." Many women had come with Jesus from Galilee to be a help to him, and they were there looking on at a distance. Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, the mother of James and John were some of these women. Jesus is buried. That evening, a rich disciple named Joseph from the town of Arimathea went and asked for Jesus' body. Pilate gave orders for it to be given to Joseph, who took a body and wrapped it in a clean linen cloth. Then Joseph put the body in his own tomb that had been cut into solid rock and had never been used. He rolled a big stone against the entrance to the tomb and went away. All this time, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting across the tomb. On the next day, which was Sabbath, the chief priests and the Pharisees went together to Pilate. They said, Sir, we remembered what this liar said while he was still alive. He claimed in 3 days he would come back from death. So please order the tomb to be carefully guarded for 3 days. If you don't, his disciples may come and steal his body. They will tell the people he has been raised to life, and this last life will be worse than the first one. Pilate said to them, "All right, take some of your soldiers and guard the tomb as well as you have known how." So they sealed it tight and placed soldiers there to guard it. Matthew 28. Jesus is alive. The Sabbath was over, and it was almost daybreak on Sunday when Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. Suddenly a strong earthquake struck, and the Lord angel came down from heaven. He rolled away the stone and sat on it. The angel looked as bright as lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guard shook from fear and fell down as though they were dead. The angel said to the women, "Don't be afraid. I know you are looking for Jesus who was nailed to the cross. He isn't here. God has raised him to life, just as Jesus said he would. Come, see the place where his body was lying. Now hurry, tell his disciples he has been raised to life and is on his way to Galilee. Go there and you will see him. This is what I came to tell you." The women were so frightened and yet very happy as they hurried from the tomb and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them and greeted them. They went near him, held on to his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said, "Don't be afraid. Tell my followers to go to Galilee. They will see me there." Report of the guard. While the women were on their way, some soldiers who had been guarding the tomb went into the city. They told the chief priest everything that had happened. So the chief priest met with the leaders and decided to bribe the soldiers with a lot of money. They said to the soldiers, "Tell anyone that Jesus' disciple came during the night and stole his body while you were asleep. If the governor hears about this, he will talk to you. Talk to him. You won't have anything to worry about." The soldier took the money and did what they were told. The people of Judah still tell each other his story, what Jesus' followers must do. Jesus' 11 disciples went to Mount Olivet in Galilee, where Jesus had told them to meet him. They saw him and worshipped him, but some of them doubted. Jesus came to them and said, "I've been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Go to the people of all nations and make them my disciples. Baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teach them to do everything I have told you. I will be with you always, even until the end of the world. Amen.